And welcome everyone to the Apprenticeship Illinois 2021 NOFO Bidders Information Session. This informational webinar will walk you through the purpose of this particular NOFO and the grant submission requirements. We want you to know that this particular webinar is for informational purposes only, and the NOFO is the guideline of record and should be referred to for any questions. We will try to reference the NOFO page numbers as we go through each slide. And for the first hour of this webinar, we will focus on the grant purposes. And the second half of the webinar, we're going to focus on the technical pre-award and submission requirements. Today's speakers will include Patrick Campbell, the Program Development Division Manager of OET, myself, Kim Kuchenbrod, an ISU consultant with DCO, working with the talent pipeline management and the work-based learning administration. Candace Dickerson, an NIU consultant working with the Apprenticeship Illinois project manager. Mark Burgess, the performance measure manager with the Office of Unemployment and Training within DCEO, and Natasha Telger, Associate Director, Center for the Workforce Development with SIU Carbondale. Welcome to everyone. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. And the next slide. This, we would like for you to pay very close attention to this particular page and bookmark this link. On this link at the Illinois WorkNet site, this will have all of the information that you will need pertaining to Apprenticeship 21, Notice of Funding. Any new information that comes available, we will post it immediately to the site. The site will also include the FAQs. It will also include any of the training the training seminars and how to register for them, as well as any resources and additional information that will benefit you as you prepare your NOFO. Next question, or next slide. Patrick?
Yes, thank you. I'm Patrick Campbell, and we are very excited to present this Notice of Funding opportunity and go through some of the details and components that have maybe changed since the 2019 Notice of Funding opportunity. We are excited that the U.S. Department of Labor, we applied and were funded under the expansion efforts that they put out, and we are very excited that we got significantly more funding for the Apprenticeship Illinois expansion than we previously have received. The state of Illinois will also be adding some of our Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act discretionary funds to make the opportunity at nearly $8 million, which is significantly higher than in the past. We want to point out the fact that this particular Notice of Funding opportunity aligns with the state plan, State of Illinois plan, and the Executive Order number 3 from Governor Pritzker. The Governor's Executive Order number 3 action agenda is to unite workforce development partners around regional cluster strategies, identify high impact regional clusters and associated in-demand occupations, implement a coordinated workforce development strategy around regional clusters, prepare Illinois workers for a career, not just their next job, increase apprenticeship opportunities, address barriers to successful training and employment, establish and support equity goals, and align with Perkins equity goals, connect job seekers with employers, shorten time from credential to employment, and integrate workforce services across program providers for one-stop customers.
How will this NOFO align with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation's talent pipeline strategies? The Apprenticeship Expansion Program is a part of the state of Illinois strategies to support industry sector partnerships. Grantees are required to participate and integrate the program activities of the U.S. Chamber's TPM initiatives, as well as participate in the Talent Pipeline Management Academy when appropriate, and this may require travel to these events. The Apprenticeship Navigators are funded under the NOFO will be required to receive training in the TPM framework that advances the industry sector's partnership strategies and provides an opportunity for work-based learning and apprenticeships. Apprenticeship Navigators will be expected to directly support the creation of industry sector partnerships. So a way to address the skills gap in talent pipeline, this particular chart will show the key roles of the navigators and the intermediaries. The navigator's role is to serve as the key point of contact in the region for any of the apprenticeship expansion efforts, and they will also be facilitating development of apprenticeships with the businesses and industries while acting as the convener for the regional coordination and the networking system. The navigators will also be supporting existing and potential intermediaries within the region. So as you can see between the navigators and the intermediaries here, both of these represent the two important sides of the statewide apprenticeship training program. The intermediaries will be responsible for coordinating with the navigators and designing registered apprenticeship training programs. They will be responsible for recruiting apprentices and prepare them for the apprenticeship program. They will implement and manage apprenticeship partnerships or programs and provide program supports and coordinating training. This NOFO will support both navigators and intermediary efforts that align and leverage existing apprenticeships and creating new registered apprenticeships throughout Illinois. Next slide.
Kim, I wanted to interject on that previous slide. A couple of points that we actually just got done talking about a little bit. It's important for current grantees to remember that not to assume that just because you're a current grantee that your grant will be renewed. Everyone will have to apply for this grant on an equal level. One of the issues that came up in a previous discussion earlier today was the fact that given COVID-19 and the return to work in much of Illinois, strategies will need to be considered. And Kim, you were just talking about some of the new components of TPM, and you may want to talk about how someone who's already certified in TPM may need to refresh themselves on these new components, etc. And that will need to be addressed in their application.
That is correct, Patrick. The Talent Pipeline Strategies has just updated a portion of their curriculum, which gives a deeper granular overview of how you look at the return on the investment with apprenticeship training programs and looking at your demand planning information. So those navigators who have already gone through the official TPM training with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce will be required to refresh that information by participating in an upcoming TPM Illinois Academy. And again, this may require you to travel to this site. So the new information in regards to each of the strategies in the talent pipeline, you will be receiving additional information on those. For example, under strategy 5, they've now added what is the risk analysis if you do not participate in talent pipeline versus participating in the talent pipeline using the sector partnerships. So there's some things that will be changing, some things will remain the same, but it basically all the new tools that are out there for it, or is going to give you a better process. For those of you who are not familiar with talent pipeline management, you can refer to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation Talent Pipeline website, and you can find a wealth of information on what talent pipeline is all about. You can also refer to the YouTube channel and search for the U.S. Chamber of Talent Pipeline, and there is a series of small snippet videos that you can review, which outlines each of those strategies.
Thanks, Kim. I also want to point out that you'll look at the bottom left-hand side of each of your slides. You will see the pages that coincide with these slides, the pages from the Notice of Funding Opportunity.
Thank you. Next slide.
All right, so there are 5 core components of registered apprenticeships, and those are related technical instruction, on-the-job training, reward for skill gains, the national credential, and business involvement. So I'm just going to kind of describe each of one of those individually. The related technical instruction, or like the RTI, it complements the on-the-job learning. So RTI is classroom-based learning that helps provide technical knowledge. The education partners collaborate with the businesses to develop the curriculum based on the skills and the knowledge needed by the apprentices. Then all partners are going to work together to identify how to pay for the related instruction or the classroom training, including the cost to the employer and other funds that could possibly be leveraged. Apprentices also receive structured on-the-job training, or like the hands-on experience. This is where the apprentices perform duties at the employer job site. They are trained by an experienced mentor or a trainer on site, and the on-the-job training is developed by mapping the skills and knowledge that the apprentice must learn over the course of the program in order to be fully proficient at the job. The apprentices also receive rewards for skill gains or progressive increases in wages as their skills increase, which can help reward and motivate the apprentices as they advance through the training. Every registered apprenticeship program will result in a nationally recognized credential, the credential being like a portable, stackable certificate of completion from an approved RAP recognized across the United States, RAP Registered Apprenticeship Program. As you build the program, keep in mind that apprenticeship programs are designed to ensure that apprentices are able to master every skill and have all the knowledge needed to be fully proficient for a specific occupation. Please note that industry recognized apprenticeship programs, or the IRAP, have been actually revoked under the Biden administration, and they'll no longer be considered for this NOFO. Lastly, and most importantly, is the business involvement. Apprenticeships must have the business involvement. We just can't stress that enough. And a lot of times obtaining the employers is usually the biggest challenge for our grantees, but they are important because they are the foundation of every apprenticeship program, and the skills needed by their workforce are at the core of the apprenticeship programs. So the businesses must play an active role in building a program and be involved in every step in designing the apprenticeship. So we just can't stress enough that the business involvement is going to be important, and that is something that you will be having to focus on your deliverables as well. Next slide.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
Yeah, you said under the RAP, I guess the national accreditation, who would you said that's a recognized apprenticeship program. Who did you say would not be recognized this year, and it was new under the Biden administration?
Yes, the IRAPs, which is the
IRAP.
industry recognized apprenticeship program set.
Okay. Industry recognized programs.
Apprenticeship programs. They were formerly known as
Okay.
IRAPs. Yes.
Okay.
Can you give us an example of what an IRAP is?
Patrick. Uh-oh. Or Kim?
An IRAP can be a specific apprenticeship training program that was designed by a particular business. And so it is not recognized by the Department of Apprenticeship simply because the competencies and the credentials do not align with the national standards. So an example might be, I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head real quick. It could be a agricultural program that was designed as an apprenticeship training program, an industrial recognized apprenticeship training program for maybe at the college level or at the very entry level. And it was designed maybe by a farm bureau, but it was only recognized by them and it wasn't recognized by other ag industries. Next slide, Candace.
Okay, so we talked about the 5 core components of the registered apprenticeships. Now this slide is actually going to show the 3 approaches to the training delivery. So this slide is a lot. It can be a little confusing. So today I'm just going to give an overview, and tomorrow there will be a session for intermediaries that I can go into more detail if needed. As a former intermediary grantee myself, I do know that we generally follow the traditional front load model. So there are 3 approaches to how one can complete the apprenticeship program. They can be time-based, competency-based, or a hybrid. So the competency-based approach is going to involve a successful demonstration of the skills. So there's no set time limit or no set amount of hours. You just need to be able to prove that you can do the task. A traditional time-based approach involves completion of at least 2,000 hours of on-the-job experience. And for some, it can be more, just depending on what the industry is. Lastly, the hybrid approach requires the apprentice to complete both a minimum number of on-the-job training and RT hours, and the apprentices must demonstrate their knowledge of skills. So it's just like a combination of them all. The next part of this slide is going to show how the classes can be delivered, and it's very flexible, and this helps to meet the needs of the employer. So as mentioned before, apprenticeship training is a combination of on-the-job training, the work experience, and the technical training. And there are 3 approaches to delivering the training. So the first one is traditional, where you receive both the related instruction and the on-the-job training concurrently throughout the program. So you can be doing both as you just progress through. The second one is when you front load the training, and that means that apprentices complete some of the related instruction before starting a job, just to be able to learn the critical skills required before the first day of the job site. And then we have segmented training, which is when the apprentices alternate between the related instruction and the on-the-job training part. Next slide. Kim?
Thank you. Apprenticeships support both the businesses and the individuals. So for the businesses, using the TPM strategies and developing employer-led collaboratives, they can identify like competencies and credentials for the high demand and the hard to fill positions, which they struggle with as one of their common pain points. These can lead to apprenticeship opportunities as one of the several pathways into a career field while helping the employer with their current hiring needs. For the individuals, and this includes students as well, which the high school students, as well as community colleges and adult learners, these career programs of study in combination with the pre-apprenticeship can lead to paid apprenticeships that will lead into a sustainable career pathway with the potential for additional work-based learning and education support as responsibility levels increase. So for example, with individuals, if a youth in the high school senior was participating in an advanced CTE program and started learning through some work-based learning activities or a pre-apprenticeship component, upon graduation, then they could move directly into an apprenticeship training program with that employer. The same if that student decided to go on to a community college, then they could also spend some time in an apprenticeship training program while earning their credentials or college credits. So for more information on the Apprenticeship Illinois support, how Apprenticeship Illinois can support businesses and individuals, I ask that you reference Appendix D of the NOFO. Next slide.
Yeah, Kim, let me interject there too, that I know that yesterday's technical assistance webinar, we had a number of folks who are actually interested in getting into an apprenticeship program. We have much of what you see in this notice of funding opportunity exists already out there in Illinois under previous funding. Those folks are out there. You can go to the Apprenticeship Illinois site, just Google that, and it will take you right in, and you will find out who to contact and how to get involved in apprenticeship programs currently if you're looking to get into an apprenticeship program. Much of what we're talking about here today is helping organizations establish themselves either as a navigator or an intermediary or both. And we're going to explain what a navigator and an intermediary are. That is a great segue into this particular slide. And the focus on this slide is really to give you an overview of what the Apprenticeship Illinois Committee has established as the way they would like to see Illinois work to increase the capacity to serve participants in targeted populations, those that are underrepresented, getting them into apprenticeship programs, while also establishing apprenticeship programs that are not typically thought of as being apprenticeship programs. So expanding the opportunities to get involved in apprenticeship programs such as information technology, finance, insurance, there's healthcare, all of the targeted industries. What we found when we started this several years ago was that it takes a great coordination, because there were a lot of folks in the apprenticeship arena, and there was a lot of siloing, and there wasn't a lot of coordination between the groups. Yes, we know of the traditional types of apprenticeships, which are in the trades, and the folks in the trades are doing a dynamite job with that, because most of the people in apprenticeship programs in Illinois, the vast majority are in trades. So we're looking to support the trade apprenticeship programs while also expanding and offering additional opportunities. And Illinois, the Apprenticeship Illinois Committee decided the best way to achieve that and maintain good communication, less siloing, and adequate capacity to issue these new initiatives is through a two-pronged approach that's seen in the middle of this slide, which is the Regional Apprenticeship Navigators and the Apprenticeship Intermediaries. And that's primarily what this notice of funding opportunity is about.
Good overview for you, Patrick. So, but let me kind of add to his comments there. As you can see in the center, that the Apprenticeship Navigators and the Apprenticeship Intermediaries are the two key components in developing a successful apprenticeship program. And of course, then the beneficiaries are going to be the businesses within the community, as well as the potential apprentices. And this kind of reiterates what I had just said in the previous slide on how the businesses and the individuals can work together to balance out the needs, not only for the individual, but the business hiring needs. And of course, then you also have your supporting stakeholders, which will be, anywhere from school districts or any educational institute, your training providers, chambers of commerce, economic development, because now you're developing a sustainable economic economy within an EDR region. So in this slide here, this is showing I will say a 50,000 foot view of what is involved in Apprenticeship Illinois. There are many moving parts, many different sister agencies that are involved with it, and different supporting organizations that are working behind the scenes to support the Apprenticeship Illinois expansion efforts. Next slide.
So the state of Illinois, the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and our sister agencies throughout the state all recognize that apprenticeships are a promising work-based learning strategy, connecting individuals to a career pathway, as well as being a solution for businesses to find and tap into undiscovered talent. The department and the Illinois Workforce Investment Board Apprenticeship Committee have determined support for apprenticeship intermediaries and regional navigators are the best investment to build the foundation for apprenticeship expansion in Illinois. Regional apprenticeship navigators and apprenticeship intermediaries represent two important sides of a statewide apprenticeship system. Navigators represent the demand side, businesses who want to host apprenticeships, etc. And intermediaries represent the supply side, the institutions and or partnerships that coordinate and implement apprenticeship programs, including recruitment, potential apprentices, and preparing them to enter the apprenticeships. As you can see from many of these slides, there's a lot of aspects to apprenticeships, and people think of them in traditional terms, and we're trying to think outside the box. And in order to do that, we look to the navigators and the intermediaries to help us through that process. So the state received its fourth apprenticeship expansion grant from the U.S. Department of Labor this June. Its express purpose is to increase the number of registered apprentices by 750 before June of 2024. As part of this goal, it's a two-pronged approach. So one part of the goal is to expand apprenticeships by 750, as well as expanding the types of apprenticeships that are offered. So looking to expand to non-traditional apprenticeships as well as traditional. The other component to our application to the Department of Labor includes increasing the number of apprentices from historically underrepresented populations and growing apprenticeships as a career pathway strategy in more places in Illinois. This includes reaching minority businesses, helping them understand how this is a real talent pipeline for them and the return on investments. So it's a heavy lift, but we think through, and we have seen success in our past grants utilizing this strategy, adding in additional components like targeted populations, we think will be the best strategy for Illinois to grow its Apprenticeship Illinois program. Next slide.
Patrick, before we move on to the next slide, I would also like to add, you referenced non-traditional apprenticeships. What we're asking is for you to really think outside the box and to look beyond what was the traditional, and you will be surprised what is out there to develop into a non-traditional apprenticeship. Here's a few examples that have been established. The apprenticeship in banking, apprenticeships in public services such as police departments, firefighters. Some of our navigators today have established equine horse or equine farming apprenticeships, meat butcher apprenticeships. And I do know that there is one currently under development working with the wineries in Illinois to developing a wine making apprenticeship. So these are not what you consider common apprenticeships, but what knowing your region the best will be able to determine what kind of non-traditional apprenticeships that can be established within your region. So
Kim, I would add in there that a couple of others that people have not traditionally thought of are in IT, healthcare, insurance programs. Aon is a perfect example of re-examining why maybe they hire people with a mandatory bachelor's degree rather than taking a look at what are the skills they need and how can they train folks. I also wanted you to talk about the arts and some non-traditional apprenticeships in that area, Kim.
yes, the arts and entertainment cluster area is one of the hardest hit by COVID this past year. And when we're talking about this particular group, you can reference Appendix G in your resources. But what we're looking at is that back office, as you might want to refer to it as, such as film editors, graphic designer, videographers, with us going to more of a remote learning or a remote working environment. We have a lot of Zoom specialists that are running the Zooms behind the scenes, such as Kirsten today. So we're looking at all of those back office ones that were pretty much devastated by the pandemic. In that category, we are also including the hospitality and the accommodations. As you can imagine, a lot of the tourism obviously was shut down with everybody being on a lockdown. And so we're going to look at what we can do in apprenticeships to reestablish those industries, or looking at the skill sets that those individuals have and how can those skills transfer into another industry, and is there apprenticeship tied to it? An example would be someone working in the culinary arts, maybe transferring into an apprenticeship training program as a pharmacy tech. Some people just don't think that the math that's involved with the culinary arts is the exact same math that is required for pharmacy tech. So that is what we consider one of those transferable skills.
Kim, can you also talk a little bit about the targeted population and the opportunities that this presents to non-traditional type of apprenticeships, such as working with disabled?
Yes, here's a few examples that we've had success in over the past couple of years. Working with individuals with a disability, the first thing is understanding the definition of a disability. Disabilities can be a physical, mental, and a medical disability. That could be someone recovering from a drug addiction, or someone who has allergies or asthma and have to have special needs within their work environment. So we are going to be having a special session to define what is a disability and how individuals with a disability can fit into the Illinois framework. But the example that we have is we had an individual in Southern Illinois who had autism, and a traveling training station was developed for the culinary arts, and the station could go to the employer, and that individual who had the autism could demonstrate right there on site what their skills how they met the skill requirements for that employer. And so employers are getting, they're becoming more and more open to looking at different talent pools rather than the common ones that they've used in the past. The same as looking at the military. The military skills can transfer into other career fields, and the military does have an online program where you can look at somebody that was involved in logistics or transportation. Their target information and their skill sets are very specific, but many of those can automatically transfer into a supply chain management career pathway. And as an individual is getting ready to leave the military, there can be a 6 months transition with apprenticeship training programs so they can ease into their civilian life, but they're walking into a specific career pathway. And of course, we have our aging population, which is our older workers, and many of them have decided to return back to work. So there's skill sets that they had in their previous career may not fit, or maybe that individual has a totally new interest in a particular field. So again, apprenticeships can fit into that area. Another one we are also looking at is the reentry. So I'll give you a great example of how an apprenticeship training program was established in the utilities cluster area. And they were looking at the pole climbers, and pole climbers require a very tight and physical core in order to climb up the poles to perform the task at hand. So, now you're looking at that physical component. And it was looked at that the physical abilities of the individuals who were re-entering the workforce met that criteria. So an organization partnered with the local or with the DOC and entered an apprenticeship training program to train these individuals in the utility field. So when they did re-enter the workforce, they were walking directly into a paid apprenticeship training program for, I believe it was for 12 weeks at over $20 an hour. Once they passed that apprenticeship training program, then they were offered full-time opportunities, and they could then enter into another apprenticeship training program, such as to be an electrician or utility worker or a programmer, or any of the back offices positions within that utility company. So that is an excellent example of how you can work in partnership to remove the silos and look at those workforces in those underrepresented populations.
And one last point, I see a lot of chatter on the chat about, can this be an apprenticeship program? Can this be an apprenticeship program? Most things lend themselves well to an apprenticeship program. Just because you don't see a registered apprenticeship program on the list from the Department of Labor, because it is registered by the Department of Labor, because it is a nationally recognized credential. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean that it cannot be moved in a short period of time into an apprenticeable occupation. And that is the job of the intermediaries, to work with the federal Office of Apprenticeship to get those programs certified and registered as an apprenticeship program. And that's how we are getting these new programs on, is through the intermediaries and the navigators. Programs like, the insurance programs that we talked about, and all of the other new kind of programs that you're hearing about. Those previously were not registered apprenticeship programs, and they have recently become, because the intermediaries and the navigators have worked with that office to get those programs into a registered apprenticeship program.
And Patrick, with that, you've reminded me of a new sector that can be tapped into, and that is the public sector. When you look at positions within public service, and that could include police officers, firefighters. It can also include the EMTs, county health officials, and it also any of the back offices within a local, community, regional, county government, as well as the state level government. So if any of those entities have, for example, a trainee position, or they only offer it within a specific time frame, you could take a hard look at those particular positions and to see if they can be converted to an apprenticeship training program as part of the onboarding into a particular agency. And I think that you would be surprised how many individuals would be interested in that, including those individuals that are leaving high school and going directly to the workforce for a few years, and then maybe receiving additional training later on, a few years later. Next slide. For this NOFO, there's going to be two program approaches. The first one is to fund the regional apprenticeship navigators, and the second one is to develop new or expand established apprenticeship intermediaries. It is our goal to establish in the regional navigators in all 10 EDR regions. Currently, we have 3 regions that do not have a navigator, and that is regions 2, 3, and 7. And so those are in the North Central, Southeastern, and East Central regions. So we are going to take a very strong look at any of the applications from that area so we can make sure that we are blanketing the entire state with navigators and intermediaries within each of the regions. So I also want to reinforce that the current, and I think Patrick said this earlier, that current grantees should not assume that they are guaranteed refunding for any of their existing programs, but they are required to submit an application for it, but there is no guarantee. So under the technical section of the apprenticeship, there are specific sessions addressing those targeted populations that Patrick and I just discussed, and all of these sessions will be recorded. So feel free to go back to the NOFO webpage, look at those targeted populations, register for those events. If it does not fit your schedule, we will be recording those and putting them back online. Next slide, please. So let's talk about our program approach 1, and that is to fund the apprenticeship navigators in all 10 economic development regions. There will be 10 to 12 grants for this particular approach, and the funding range will be between $75,000 and $125,000. So the total amount that's going to be obligated to navigators is $750,000 to $1.5 million. So this grant round seeks to, first of all, cultivate apprenticeship development that's going to lead to increased registered apprenticeship training programs in all areas of the state, especially, I'm emphasizing again, those 3 areas where there isn't a navigator. We also want to promote new strategies for communicating the value of workforce diversity to the employers and proactively create equity strategies that will lead to historically underrepresented individuals. We also want to be able to increase the number of individuals entering and succeeding in the registered apprenticeship programs. I want to make a special note that there will be consideration given to supporting more than one apprenticeship navigator from the greater Chicago region, which is EDR 4. The map listed here are presented on this particular slide. If you're not familiar with it, outlines each of the EDR regions and the LWIAs within those regions. This is also on the website for further reference. Next slide. So let's talk about what does a regional navigator do? Most importantly, they're going to be the key the key point of contact to serve as apprenticeship consultants to the businesses and any of the education providers, as well as local workforce areas, chambers of commerce, and any other apprenticeship partners. Serving as a convener, the navigator will be responsible for coordinating the sector partnerships between the interested parties and connecting the various apprenticeship components with supportive services. And that will help reduce the barriers for workers entering the workforce. They will also be responsible for facilitating development of apprenticeships with businesses and the industries. At serving as a consultant, they can also conduct worksite visits to assess the viability of apprenticeship within that industry. They will also identify informational and financial resources, including apprenticeship tax credits and any other pertinent information that a business partner may have in regards to establishing an apprenticeship. They will also acting as a convener for a regional coordination for the system network, and this will involve us establishing talent pipeline strategies. So with that, they'll develop an extensive network of the stakeholders at all levels. So this will include public and private sector within a region, and collectively they will look to identify opportunities for either the program expansions, promotion, short and long-term demand planning. They will also address any competencies for specific positions, as well as looking at the credentials. As Patrick alluded to this a little earlier, but when you're looking at the credentials, employers are going to pull this information from their job descriptions, and through the TPM, they will be able to take a very hard look at, do you need to have a bachelor's degree for this entry-level position? Or can they adjust their job descriptions to say, or. So no experience, or some college and 2 years of experience, or an associate's degree and 4 years of experience, or a bachelor's degree with 0. See what I'm saying? So there you can look at all the different pathways rather than tying yourself into one particular pathway. And with this, you'll be able to increase your talent pool. So they will also help the business sector partnerships develop a value stream. And then also with the value stream, we're looking at those educational partners, so that the educational partners become the supplier end. And then as the supplier role diminishes, then the employer role will increase as you go through the different levels of education. So, and then most importantly to any of the businesses is looking at the return on the investment with it. So the navigators will also provide any administrative and technical support that an intermediary will need, and all the navigators will participate in the state of Illinois sponsored work programs and training programs. Next slide, please. So continuing from what I just shared with you on the previous slide, the navigator is going to also be responsible for promoting and creating a network that includes, but is not limited to, industry associations, chambers of commerce, CBOs, local workforce areas, educational institutes, and that can be community colleges, technical schools, and high schools within that region. Collectively, all of these partners are going to develop a sector partnership to look at an overview of those common pain points to develop a solid talent pipeline. And these pain points are the most common ones are unfilled positions, upskilling, and retaining the current staff. So through developing apprenticeship opportunities that lead to a nationally recognized credential, this will help expand Illinois' workforce. They will also validate and demonstrate the deliverables to the business partners by articulating how they will be collecting the data through the TPM process, how they will be performing outreach, and this all must be outlined in your application if you are applying as a navigator.
So Kim,
Next.
let me add a couple of things to this in that, you know, a lot of folks may be looking at this in terms of, we already do all of this. And so, you know, we'll just apply, and it's fantastic that you're already doing this. But when you apply to be a navigator, you need to have a dedicated strategic approach to all of these components. And you need to identify staff that will be dedicated to this and how this aligns with your other partnerships, your business community, the targeted communities within your region, and how you work across regional lines and with other intermediaries. Another component that's been added into this notice of funding opportunity is it's not enough any longer to show that you reached out to 500 businesses, 1,000 businesses, in some cases 2,000 businesses, if there are no results with that. We need more data validation on this. We are in the midst of creating a system to track the data validation on this. And we need for the applicants to articulate the rationale that they have developed to align these programs and expand apprenticeships in their region, and how they intend to work across local workforce area lines with other local workforce areas within their region, how they've reviewed the regional plan, the state plan, and aligned with those plans, and how they intend to justify results and what those results look like. So it's a lot more complicated this go around than it was in the past. And we're really looking for navigators to be able to validate their strategy and what the results will actually be.
Thank you, Patrick. Next slide. So Patrick just referenced some of these points here, but I want to remind you that many of these are outlined in attachment 3 under your resources of the NOFO. So we will be looking for specific project outcomes, goals, and deliverables, and each of these must be included in your proposal. The agreed upon deliverables and outcomes will be tracked utilizing project management tools developed by the DCEO and the Illinois WorkNet team. Competitive applications will clearly articulate how the activities funded under the NOFO support the goals to create the 750 apprenticeships and as measured by the activities and outcomes. Grant applications must include projected outcomes that were provided in attachment 3. Now we're going to move over and we're going to talk about program approach number 2. Candace?
All right, thanks, Kim. So program approach 2 for this NOFO is to develop new and expanding established apprenticeship programs through the intermediaries. Again, we have the navigators and then the intermediaries. So the number of grants that will be awarded for the intermediary component will be 16 to 20. And the funding range, the grantees will be awarded anywhere between $150,000 to $350,000. with a total of $1 to $4 million being put into, awarded out to the intermediaries. So just to give you a brief overview again, a new intermediary is one that can quickly get an emerging apprenticeship program into operation, and they're able to immediately recruit and register apprentices. An existing intermediary has programs that are already in place, and the organization is able to easily supplement those programs. So an example of an existing program is one who has an existing program, and wants to diversify their program with DEI to maybe include women, minorities, persons with disabilities, things of that nature. The The grant, this one that we're doing now, it wants to fund projects that proactively support equity by creating recruiting, outreach, and support strategies that are going to result in an increase in the number of the diverse populations that are enrolling in and successfully completing apprenticeship. This is to be noted that those who focus on the targeted populations are given a priority in the merit review process. All of the target populations are listed in the NOFO, so make sure that you do review that section of the NOFO. Keep in mind that along with diversifying the population participants, we want you to start thinking about diversifying the business owners. So looking at business owners who are of this diverse population. And also when recruiting, consider the partners that service these type of individuals. Basically, as mentioned all throughout the slide, we just want you to start thinking out the box. Next slide. Okay. So this one is just going to touch base on what the intermediary does. And the main goal of the intermediary is to ease the burden for businesses, particularly the small companies that don't have the personnel to execute such tasks, like performing the administrative responsibilities, such as registering businesses, registering apprentices, tracking the activities, reporting the results. The intermediaries must be the key point of contact and support for any business in the region. The intermediaries must also coordinate with a regional navigator to facilitate the registration of new programs with the United States Department of Labor, Office of Apprenticeship, or expansion of existing programs. The intermediaries must understand business development and workforce development. And again, they help the employer to determine their needs and coordinate apprenticeship programs and help them hire and mentor apprentices. So they are basically there to uncover the business needs and to work with them to determine how an apprenticeship can help meet their goals. Next slide.
Candace,
Patrick, I'm sorry.
let me interject as a part of this as well, that some of you that are on this call may be thinking to yourself, you know, I know how to do some of this, I don't know how to do all of it. You know, that third point there is managing apprenticeship partnerships or programs. You don't have to be the grantee. You can be a partner with the actual grantee. So reaching out, talking with other partners, we are not looking for a sole entity. We are looking to foster partnerships. So that's going to be an advantage to you in applying for this, you know, by having partnerships that are well defined in terms of what role you will play within that partnership. So please keep that in mind when you're listening to these things. It could be a group of intermediaries that are applying as a single entity and as multi-partnered intermediaries. So keep that in mind when you're thinking of this. You may want to reach out to some of the existing intermediaries. I saw a few in the chat. And you also may want to reach out to the navigators. They may have an idea of how to facilitate that. They're all online under Apprenticeship Illinois. Go to the navigator section. You can reach out and you can speak with the current navigators about what they do and who the intermediaries are and who you, based on your target population, the employers that you're working with, who you would like to partner with. And can they help you facilitate that?
Okay. Thank you. Next slide, please. Oh, we're on it. I'm sorry. Go back. So again, just to recap, the major goal for the intermediaries is to recruit apprentices and prepare them for their apprenticeships. So most of this has been spoken to on a previous slide. And then of course, Patrick did add a lot to that as well. But just to keep in mind that the intermediaries must demonstrate a knowledge of the DEI, the diversity, the equity, and the inclusion within the apprenticeship occupations and industries. It's very, very, very important for intermediaries to develop the strong partnerships that as he just expressed a moment ago. Another example could be partnering with a training provider that's already conducting RTI. And when you're partnering with them, you are maybe looking to utilize the resources from that other organization, like the sharing of the curriculum, standards, and best practices. Again, the strong partnerships can definitely help to build your program and to have more apprenticeships developed in that area. Next slide. All right, so between the new and existing intermediaries, we kind of went over this a few times already, so I don't want to be redundant, but new as an intermediary could be a school district that's trying to start a high school registered apprenticeships, or an industry association that's just getting started with apprenticeships. So again, the new intermediary is one that can quickly get an emerging apprenticeship into operation and is able to immediately recruit and register apprentices. The existing intermediary doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that's funded through one of our grants, but they have some type of program that's already in place, and the organization is able to easily supplement the programs. Again, somebody looking to diversify their current program to include women or minorities or things of that nature. Either way, you have to state in your application exactly how you're going to help the state hit its goal of 750 apprentices, which is the ultimate goal of this grant. If you are a current intermediary, this has been said before, you must be able to articulate how your program will increase the number of registered apprentices and how you can expand in other sectors. And if you are a current grantee, you must be able to describe how you met your current grant obligations.
Candace, intermediaries can also work with pre-apprenticeship programs, but under this, the grant qualifications for this, you can work with pre-apprenticeship folks as long as by the completion of your grant deliverables, they are in a registered apprenticeship. So
Right.
you may have to do some pre-apprenticeship, and I speak particularly of school districts, and there are a number of intermediaries we currently have that are working with pre-apprenticeship programs with
Mhm.
folks in those programs, and then ensuring that they are in a registered apprenticeship before their grant ends, because the only deliverable we can count is the actual registered apprenticeship. So, but
Correct.
we are willing to fund pre-apprenticeships as well.
That is correct. Thank you. And finally, which is very important, are the deliverables and the outcomes of the intermediaries. So very important for you to know if you plan on applying to be an intermediary, to refer to page 10 of the NOFO and Appendix K, and they'll spell out the deliverables and the outcomes. But in this, I'm just going to focus on number one, the number of apprentices you must hit your deliverable. And number two, we really want our grantees to understand employer outreach, how important it is, and to know that it's not just contacting an employer, they need to be engaged. So it's not just I called, I left a message, and then that counts as one. You actually have to kind of speak to someone and have to go a little deeper. So the United States Department of Labor, they define engaged employers as an employer that has adopted apprenticeship programming and is planning to host a registered apprentice, and contacted employers have been outreach to an organization, and they kind of discussed apprenticeship opportunities with the decision makers. So we just want to make sure that you're very clear on what's going to count in your deliverables for the employer And this is again to make sure that we can hit our number of 750. Anything extra, Patrick?
Oh, I think you did.
I
a
know
good
that's an
job
important one.
covering it.
Yeah, no, that's an important one. And again, all the deliverables are listed in the NOFO page 10. Next slide.
Okay, this is Natasha Telger with SAU, Illinois WorkNet, and I am just going to talk a little bit about the tools that are in place, or some of the new tools that will be available for this, for the intermediaries as well as the navigators. These tools, again, are going to be available through Illinois WorkNet, and they have tools that are specific to, you'll see going along from starting from the left and going across to the right, tools for intermediaries, navigators, and places for individuals to see their progress as well. Then we have the tools that are specifically for intermediaries, such as intake, form, eligibility, enrollment. We also have some case management tools along with communication tools and case notes. We also have a place to pull in the other individuals impacted, as well as incumbent worker information. Then moving over to the right, we have what we call capacity and business engagement tools for the navigators, which includes EBS, which is business intelligence tools, as well as, again, additional communication tools, so we don't have employer fatigue, as well as follow-up tools, and then uh, uh, places where you can enter your outreach events and organization and engagement information. We have a place for you to enter your work plan, as well as where you can pull different reports so you can see your overall status, which includes participant dashboards and reports. We also have iPads, which is performance and reporting. And then we also have a place for you to connect to navigators. So this is where we'll pull it all together and have a map where you can identify intermediaries, navigators, American Job Centers, and so forth. And this information that is collected within this tool will be used for different types of reporting as we move forward, required reporting.
Thanks, Natasha. This is Mark Burgess with the Office of Employment and Training. Going to speak a little bit on performance. Kim had already mentioned previously that there are certain goals and outcomes and deliverables of the grantees. And then Natasha referred to the mechanisms to track performance and reporting. So there are some performance outcomes and requirements that you're going to be obligated to comply with if you're awarded a grant. We ask that all grantees report certain performance information on a quarterly basis. You see here on this slide, those quarters run with ending periods of March, June, September, and December. And within 30 days of the end of each of those quarters, it is expected that all the information is submitted so that we can conduct the appropriate performance reviews and submissions to Department of Labor as appropriate. All of our local areas, the 22 local areas throughout the state, have negotiated performance goals and levels of outcomes for these measures. And so you're all expected to identify in your local area the measurable goal and meet that. On the right-hand side, you see the 5 measures that are reported for WIOA, and we'll go into those in the next couple of slides. The first 3 of these measures are exit outcomes. That means we track them following the exit from the program. If you'll please advance the slide. Thanks. And so we're tracking and looking at individuals who are employed 2 quarters, so 6 months after they exit the program, as well as 4 quarters after they exit the program, to ensure they're getting timely employment and as well as keeping that employment throughout a given year. You'll note in the first two measures that if you are serving individuals that are determined eligible as Title I youth as well, it's not only employment that is tracked, but if they just move and advance into other education or training activities, they would also be considered a positive outcome for those two measures. And then the third exit outcome is median earnings. So we track that for all the individuals that are in unsubsidized employment 2 quarters also after exit. And then the final two measures are training related measurements. The first one being the credential attainment rate. Would you please advance the slide? And the credential attainment rate is very relatable to the apprenticeship programs, because once an individual completes their apprenticeship, the certification they get from an apprenticeship program gives them a positive outcome. And we track that to be within 1 year of their program exit, they should get that completion. And then the final measurement is the measurable skill gains. These are periodic attainments of gains in their skills and their understanding and their education that are trackable to the employment that they are in, especially for apprenticeships. They are documented academic, they could be technical, occupational, or other forms of progress towards such a credential or employment. So this one's unique in that you can get at least one or up to one measurable skill gain per program year. So our program years are July to June. So in each of those 12-month periods, you can have a measurable skill gain. So if you have a 2-year apprenticeship program, we expect that the individuals will have at least 2 measurable skill gains, one in each of those 2 program years that they're employed or in training. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Now we're going to transition into a portion, the proposal portion of this presentation. So here's a few things that we'd like to highlight as requirements to make sure that they are in your NOFO. First of all, the talent pipeline management participation is a requirement. You want to identify the targeted populations that are identified in the NOFO and how you're going to assist them with the apprenticeship training programs. You should use the targeted industries, the occupation and growth sectors, and this should align with the unified plan as well as your regional plan. Incumbent workers, new employees, youth apprenticeships, and pre-apprenticeships are all being considered under this NOFO. The most important aspect of this is looking at the DEI and looking at how we can diversify our workforce and how can we tap into those underrepresented populations. Some of those populations I discussed earlier, such as the reentry, the aging, those with disabilities, but that's just hitting the just a few of them. There are many more agencies out there or equitable things that we need to address. So feel free to include those others that are not listed in the NOFO. And then, of course, the leveraging programs and funding from other partners. When you join a partnership with this, you can leverage those program funds to support your grant application. For example, if you're working with llinois, or you can use those funds to help leverage with this grant as well. Or if you're working with someone who has already received a grant and you're a partner with them, you can strengthen your program by leveraging those programs and funding to support your own NOFO. So
Kim, I just want to say on that leveraged
yes.
funds, from the last round of the in 2019, it was amazing to me how many folks were actually leveraging funds but did not include that in their grant application. It is a positive thing. We look favorably upon that. We want to see partnerships and leveraged funds because that establishes sustainability for the program to us. So if you're working with an H-1B grantee if you're working with unions who support it, if you're working with businesses who are leveraging, training time, there's a lot of different, or local workforce areas, like you said. It is just amazing how many people don't point out the leveraged funds, working with business entities, chambers, et cetera, who are leveraging facilities or whatever it might be. I would strongly encourage that, because when the reviewers read this, that is one of the things they're looking for.
Thank you, Patrick. Next slide. Again, just reinforcing, these are some of the requirements for both the navigators and the intermediaries. They all must participate in other activities related to apprenticeship system building, encourage expansion in emerging industries, and align those with the regional and local workforce plans. They will use state performance management systems for participant outcomes, and they're collectively, we are all working towards the goal of having 750 new apprenticeships by 2024. Next slide.
Okay, so as mentioned throughout the NOFO, there are target populations that the grant wants to serve. The Apprenticeship Illinois Committee, the governor, the United States Department of Labor, and DCEO are all putting an emphasis on DEI. Again, the list of target populations is on page 15 of the NOFO, and DEI is a priority. So some of the strategies that we're looking to address DEI are going to include changes in the recruitment practices. So we're looking to have you go outside of where you may normally look for recruiting. The projects funded under the NOFO are looking for intentional and inclusive marketing. So including using different images from the DEI that will address discrimination within programs and workplaces. And we're also looking to offer support that boosts retention and completion for our participants, such as childcare, transportation, and career counseling, as we know that oftentimes those are things that may hinder and create barriers for our participants to be able to complete. Specifically, the proposal reviewers will be looking for evidence that the applicants did include DEI action plans for the navigators and the intermediaries as outlined in Appendix E. Next slide.
So let's transition over to the targeted industries, occupation, and growth sectors that will be considered for this NOFO. So the next 3 slides will illustrate Illinois' top growth industries. And this data was pulled from the Illinois Department of Employment Securities and the Economic Modeling Services, EMSI. So Table 1 recognizes the top growth through the Unified State Plan. And by expanding these registered apprenticeship training programs, talent and business development services, this NOFO can help support projects that target industries recovering from the pandemic while developing that stronger workforce. So some of these, and I know the data that is shared here on the years and everything, it's a little dated, but it's still relevant. These are the areas in the top growth industries that were identified in the last unified plan. And we also realize that the pandemic has significantly impacted each of these areas. So the targeted occupations that we are looking for will require specialized knowledge and skills based best gained through the on-the-job training, better known as OJT, and feature strong career pathway opportunities for advancement. Next slide, please. So here in table 2, we're looking at some of the hardest hit industries impacted by COVID. So industries such as accommodation and food services, retail trade, manufacturing, healthcare, and social assistance. And again, the arts, entertainment, recreation, and hospitality industries are some of those hardest hit. Now, and some of these may not, there might be particular industries within your region that was hit hard by the COVID. So you would also need to, you can look at those industries as well. But collectively on table 2, it is identifying the top identified clear clusters who were impacted. So another area that was hit was the small businesses. They have severely impacted by the pandemic as well as in the rural regions. These impacts were exacerbated in the rural regions such as Southern Illinois, which is still recovering from the impacts of deindustrialization, energy economy shifts away from coal, and the loss of those companies that provided employment to the residents in those areas. So in the NOFO, please include a brief analysis of how this project will be informed by labor market information and current local and regional workforce data that identifies the needs of not only the employers, but the job seekers as well. Next slide, please. Okay, table 3 is going to outline the emerging registered apprenticeship opportunities, the sector focus, and whether or not the industry is recovering or an expansion or growth phase. So although the apprenticeships have been traditionally associated with construction or the trade occupations, apprenticeship programs are now within a variety of industries, as we have talked about through this whole entire presentation. So let's look at the table. For example, on the left side, we have many of the industries that are emerging with registered apprenticeship training programs. And within those industries, there can be multiple positions available or considered for apprenticeships. And then you can also see if they're in a recovery or a new area in regards to a registered apprenticeship training programs. I do want to point out there are a couple of cross sectors that have been identified, and these are positions that are included in every industry, such as human resources, HR specialists, janitorial. I mean, even when you look at education category, you don't look just at the teachers in the classroom, but you're going to look at the paraprofessionals, the social workers, the case managers, the secretarial support, the janitors, the bus drivers, the groundskeeper. All of those would fall into that particular category. And we also have put in there, the retail trade, that is managers in the retail stores. But as we are trying to recover from the pandemic, many of the businesses still struggle on getting some of their employees back or getting these positions filled. So they're going to be looking for upskilling existing employees so that then they can hire in at the entry level, while maintaining and promoting their current workforce, which will help with the retention growth. So apprenticeship training is flexible. It can be used in all different programs at all different levels. So and another one I wanted to point out, that is really hard hit. And I also want, let me back up. I want to point out that let's look at the healthcare, for example, and positions in that area could include anything from RN, LPN, CNA, CMA, rad techs, pharmacy tech. All of those would fall under the healthcare. So we also need to look at, as we recover from the pandemic, what will happen with some of these individuals leaving this career field for, say, burnout, quality of life. So if they're going to enter into another particular industry, as I mentioned earlier, we can look at those transferable skills. But if individuals are leaving that particular pathway, it may be, instead of a growth, it could easily turn into a recovery based on those who may consider leaving a particular industry. Next slide, please. Patrick?
Yes, so elements for a competitive proposal. Some things that we are really looking for, MOUs that spell out specifically what the deliverables are from your partners. As the grantee or the awardee, we are looking for very specific MOUs. From businesses, we would accept a letter of commitment. I know those are harder to get MOUs from businesses, but letters of commitment would be acceptable too. I do want to say that, you know, you need to establish capacity. We've had some grantees in the past that were not able to get staff hired, were not able to ramp up until 6 months or a year into their grant. That is not acceptable. And, you know, we will be considering the obligation in cases like that moving forward. We want to see resumes of people that you would consider for the job if you have not already hired them. We want to see a need. We want to see that there's a need, that you understand, you know, your historical connection to the targeted population, to the businesses you're working with, to the industry or sector. We want to see that it's cost effective, and we want to see a quality project. Don't assume we know anything about you. If you were a previous grantee, remember the people reviewing this are not familiar with you. So you need to establish that. You need to have these goals, and you need to answer the questions that are throughout the notice of funding opportunity. We know that the organizations that submit these are, in most cases, wonderful organizations, but having, you know, a large number of pages about your organization and how terrific you are does not spell out a strategy that is backed up by data and by, you know, deliverables in the past. So it's important for you to answer the questions, and when you complete your application, to go back through and ask yourself, have we demonstrated and articulated that we have the capacity to do this? Have we demonstrated and articulated that we have a connection and a need for this particular apprenticeship program? Have we produced all elements that are required for a competitive proposal? And is it very clear in the presentation? And then have we talked about the cost effectiveness, how we'll demonstrate a return on investment to employers, the community, and the state? So I think it's really critical that you review these grants before you submit them, the applications, and ask yourself those questions. Next slide. We're nearly out of time, or we're out of time. And so these slides speak somewhat for themselves. We cannot answer any individual questions outside of a public forum. All questions need to be submitted to the FAQ page. We are required not to answer those questions specifically. It would give an applicant an advantage if we're answering that for them specifically. So please post it to the FAQ, and we will check it daily, and we'll try to get that answer back to you as soon as possible. I also, before we run out of time, want to say that applications, the location for the applications is in the slides here. Yes, we will have the slides posted to the website, but all applications need to be in by 5 p.m. Central Time. And there, any application received at 5:01 will be rejected. So it has to be by 5 p.m. Please don't wait until the last minute. There's going to be a lot of people logging in, trying to get their information in, and I would highly encourage you to get it in beforehand. coordinate with your regional and local workforce plans. Check those out. Those are on Illinois WorkNet. You can see all of these. You can talk to your local workforce area unless you are a local workforce area. And then you need to look at your regional plan as well and the state plan and make sure you're tied in with that. The MOUs and the partnerships are critical components. And I think that summarizes it, unless anybody else has something else to add.
Yes, I was gonna see, Kristen, can you go to slide 42 just so they can see? He did mention that the applications need to be in by 5 p.m. and that and that's the email address that it goes to. But I think on one of the slides, apprenticeships@illinoisworknet.com is going to be the email address that you will go to if you have any questions about the NOFO at all. And then we're going to have a FAQ section on the homepage. But again, most questions are going to be answered on the homepage. We will not be able to answer anything specific directly.
Any questions that were posted to the chat, we will be answering those on the FAQ as well.
Yes.
So please don't feel that your question was, I tried to get to as many as I could, but please don't feel like your question will not be answered. It will be answered on the FAQ. If the question's already been answered by a previous FAQ, we will refer to that and say, please refer to the FAQ. That question has already been answered. I want to thank everyone for your time. We hope sincerely that this has been helpful in deciding whether you'll be a partner or whether you'll be an applicant, or just in general, more informative about the Apprenticeship Illinois expansion efforts and our goals that we look for. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And we will have a repeat of the budget session that was yesterday. That will be repeated this afternoon at 3:30. So we have about an hour break. So please join us for that. You can register on the NOFO website if you haven't done so. And if you're not able to attend, then the recording for the budget session will be up on the NOFO website. But we will have that session repeated this afternoon as well. So we look forward to seeing you there. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.